day, everyone. Welcome to our lecture on Vaughn's writing philosophy. So the outline for our activity is that we'll have first the lecture and later the question and answer. So the first thing that Vaughn would like us to understand is that there are two possible ways of understanding philosophy. First, as a critical academic enterprise and as a worldview. As a critical academic enterprise, we can see philosophy as a critical and wide-ranging search for understanding. As a worldview, on the other hand, philosophy is a set of fundamental ideas that help us make sense of a wide range of important issues in life. A worldview defines for us what exists, what should be, and what we can know. So the first important thing that we have to take into account regarding this is that philosophy is a process that is careful, systematic investigation of fundamental beliefs. When we get in the process, we are doing philosophy. We are doing what both great philosophers and ordinary people have done for thousands of years. And to put it more systematically, doing philosophy consists mainly of the systematic use of critical reasoning to explore answers to basic questions, to clarify the meaning of concepts, and to formulate or evaluate logical arguments. So philosophy is divided into many fields, but just to give us some idea, for instance, metaphysics would deal with the study of reality of all things that exist in the light of knowing their first principles and causes. Ethics would deal with the study of the rightness or wrongness of particular actions and the standards by which we judge them. And related to this is axiology, which would deal with the study of values. Epistemology would deal with the questions of how do we know and questions of criteria for claiming whether our beliefs are justified or not. While logic is a study of correct inferential thinking, that is, of correct forms of reasoning so that we can avoid arriving at wrong conclusions. So what do we do in philosophy? One of the things that we do in philosophy is to clarify statements and concepts through critical thinking. In philosophy and in any other kind of rational inquiry, accepting a conclusion or a statement without good reasons is an elementary mistake in reasoning. We think through arguments to determine which is a good one from what is bad. So when we do philosophy, then we are likely at some point to be grappling with arguments. We are trying either first to devise an argument to support a statement, or two, to evaluate an argument to see if there are really good reasons for accepting its conclusion. We must keep in mind that philosophy is systematic, analytic, productive thinking, which is something you can use in many everyday situations and fields of study. But why write philosophy or philosophically? Well, sometimes writing philosophy is the best way to think about philosophy. And through writing, secondly, you may become a better thinker. And third, you may come to better understand and appreciate some of the important ideas of the great thinkers of the past. So let us get into some principles about reading philosophy. One of the most important things that we should develop as students of philosophy is that we should approach the text with an open mind. Philosophy at its best is a fair-minded, fearless search for truth. Anything that interferes with this noble quest must be overcome and cast aside. Avoid making a judgment about an essay's ideas or arguments until you fully understand them and have fairly considered them. Try to maintain a neutral attitude toward the writer, assuming that he or she is neither right nor wrong. If you are reading the work of a famous philosopher and you find yourself thinking that his or her ideas are obviously silly or ridiculous, think again, because you might just simply be biased. Once you do make a judgment about the value of a writer's ideas, ask yourself what reasons you have to support that argument. Another principle that we have to take into account is that we should read actively and critically. Philosophical reading is intense. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be crammed. So we have to clarify terms and concepts actively. Philosophical reading is also critical reading, where you ask not what something means, but whether a statement is true and if the reasoning is solid. Here we can say that speed reading is out of the question. Skimming is pointless. So let's go about identifying arguments. Vaughn provides us with some strategies, and he outlines them. First, that we must identify the conclusion first, then the premises. Second, we can outline, paraphrase, or summarize the argument. And third, we can evaluate the argument and formulate a tentative judgment. Let's go with the first step. In logic, the terms premise and conclusion denote their function within an argument. An argument is a group of connected statements that contains something to be proven, called conclusion, which in turn depends on other statements taken as support or premises. A conclusion is a statement whose truth is established by appeal to the support of premises. The conclusion is also sometimes called as the claim or the thesis. Proceeding to the second step, outlining an argument means identifying the premises and the conclusion and arranging them in an outline pattern that reveals the relationships. To some students, writing a paraphrase or summary of the argument is more helpful than creating an outline. In a paraphrase, you create your own accurate facsimile of the argument, rephrasing it in your own words and expressions. In a summary, you paraphrase and condense, distilling the argument into fewer words than the original has. The third step is about evaluation. So the existence of a premise conclusion structure is the defining characteristic of an argument. This means that to determine whether a group of statements is an argument or not, we must look if it has its premise conclusion structure. If it does not have it, then it is not an argument. Once you are able to check the premise conclusion structure, the next thing that we must do is to determine whether the conclusion really follows from the premises. If it does, we must next examine or determine whether the argument is sound or cogent by checking whether the premises are true or not. Only true premises can provide us with conclusions that are worth believing. So let's have a quick review of the basic definitions from Vaughn himself. So a statement is an assertion that something is or is not the case. A statement is either true or false. Argument is a combination of statements in which some of them are intended to support another of them. Statements supposedly providing the support are the premises. The statement being supported is the conclusion. Next is about deductive argument, an argument that is supposed to offer logically conclusive support for its conclusion. Deductive arguments can be valid or invalid. A valid argument with true premises is said to be sound. Inductive argument is an argument meant to offer probable support for its conclusion. Inductive arguments can be strong or weak. A strong argument with two premises is said to be cogent. So a note on deductive arguments. Typically, a deduction is reasoning from general principles to particular conclusions. An example of which is a categorical syllogism. Men are rational, you are a man, therefore you are rational. Other types of deductions include argument from mathematics, argument from definition, conditional syllogism, and disjunctive syllogism. With regard to inductive arguments, typically an induction is reasoning from the particular to the general, an example of which is an inductive generalization. Because the mangoes which my mom brought from Iloilo are sweet, I conclude that mangoes from Iloilo are sweet. Other types of inductions include prediction, argument from analogy, argument from authority, arguments based on science, and causal inference. So we can give many examples of these arguments, both deductive and inductive, but we will only get one from Vaughn for the sake of facility, and I have chosen the last argument that he provides with his analysis of the design argument as written by Nigel of Barberton. So you see here in this argument, there are two premises and a conclusion. The first premise goes, the design argument doesn't show that the world must have been created by just one God. And premise two, the design argument doesn't show that the world must have been created by an all-powerful God. So in conclusion, therefore, the design argument doesn't show that the traditional God, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, exists rather than some other type of God or gods. So here we ask a crucial question. Does the conclusion really follow from the premises? According to Vaughn, in this case, we would have to say yes. If the design argument fails to show that the creator is one God, and if it fails to show that the creator is all-powerful, then we must conclude that the design argument fails to show that the traditional God exists. That is, the author's argument is valid. Take note here that there can be many interpretations and counter arguments that can be given to this. But for now, it is enough that we see that it's possible to arrange arguments into traditional forms so that we can easily understand them. So that would be all for this lecture, and hope to see you in the next one. Good day, everyone.